The junkyard whisper. The sky above the junkyard was gray and heavy, filled with smoke from broken engines and old fires. A cold wind blew between the metal mountains, howling like a ghost. Sharp bits of metal crunched under Raylan's boots as he moved slowly through the wreckage, searching for useful parts. He had done this 100 times before. Same boots, same broken ships, same silence. But today, something felt different. He heard it just once. A small sound, too soft to be a machine. It was like a whimper, a cry, maybe. Then silence again. Raylan stopped, standing still between two massive pieces of a rusted cargo hauler. He listened. Another sound. This time clearer. A tiny cough. And then, something that chilled him to the bone. A voice, weak and shaky. Mama. Raylan turned toward the sound. He stepped around broken panels and ducked under a fallen wing. The smell of fuel was thick. His eyes scanned the shadows. Then he saw them. A shape curled up under a metal sheet. No, not one, but two. A small figure held tightly against a larger one. Both were covered in dirt and wrapped in what looked like old cloth. The child looked no older than 6. Her skin was pale blue and her eyes too big for her face. She was trembling. The woman, her mother, barely looked alive. Her eyes opened just enough to see Raylan. She pulled the child closer and tried to sit up, but her body was weak. She didn't speak. She only stared, waiting for the worst. Raylan raised his hand slowly. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The child hid her face in her mother's chest. The woman stayed quiet, not trusting him. Raylan knelt beside them, careful not to make sudden moves. "You're freezing," he said, "and starving." Still no answer. He looked around. If a drone passed by and scanned this area, they'd be taken, captured, maybe worse. The Corps would say they were trespassers, or useless. People didn't care what happened to aliens hiding in scrap. Raylan looked at them again. They weren't dangerous. They were scared. He took off his coat and gently laid it over the two. The woman flinched but then relaxed when she felt the warmth. The child peeked at him for just a second. "I've got a place," Raylan said. "Not far from here. A small shelter. It's not much, but it's warm." Still no answer. Raylan stood and looked out across the junkyard. Then he heard a soft voice behind him. "Help us?" He turned. The mother was staring at him. Her lips barely moved, but her eyes were wide. Hope and fear mixed together. Raylan nodded. "Yeah, I'll help." He knelt again, carefully picking up the child first. She was light, too light, skin and bones. Her small fingers clutched his arm, but she didn't speak. Then he helped the mother. She could barely walk, so he wrapped her arm around his shoulder. Together they moved slowly through the maze of metal. Halfway to his shelter, Raylan heard a low beep. He froze. A patrolling drone was nearby. Its red eye glowed in the distance. If it scanned them, it would call in the scanners. The corpse didn't care why aliens were here, especially poor ones. Raylan pulled them behind a broken engine and pressed them down. The mother held her breath. The child started to cry just a little. Raylan looked at the drone. It was getting closer. Then, without thinking, he stood up and stepped into the open. The drone's red eye flashed and turned toward him. "Identify," it demanded. Raylan pulled out a small metal piece from his bag, a heat coil he had found earlier. He waved it. "Just me," he said. "Still searching for coils. Found a good one today." The drone scanned the coil, then scanned Raylan. Long pause. "Too long. Area's restricted," the drone said. "I know," Raylan answered, "but no one patrols this side. I thought it was safe." Another pause. Then the drone beeped and floated away. Raylan waited until it was gone. Then he rushed back and lifted the mother and child again. Finally, they reached his shelter. It was built inside an old cargo pod, hidden between two large wrecks. Inside it was dark but warm. Raylan had set up a small power source, a fireplate, and a few sleeping mats. He laid them down gently and gave them water and food. The child ate quickly. The mother ate slower, still watching him. After a long silence, the mother whispered, Why help us?" Raylan sat beside the door and looked at the fire. "Because someone should." The child leaned against her mother and closed her eyes. The woman pulled her close. Raylan watched them. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know their story yet. But one thing was clear. They weren't trash. They were survivors. And now, they were his responsibility. The first warmth. The inside of Raylan's shelter was quiet except for the soft crackling of the fireplate. The heat warmed the air slowly, chasing away the cold that had sunk deep into the bones of the alien mother and her child. Raylan sat near the door, watching them from the shadows. He didn't want to make them feel watched, but he also didn't want to leave them alone. Not yet. The little girl had curled up beside the fire, her hands finally steady enough to hold a warm metal cup. She sipped slowly, eyes half closed. Her mother sat behind her, one hand resting on the child's back protectively, as if she feared someone might still take her away. Raylan had given them food, real food, not processed junk. It was the first solid meal the mother had eaten in what looked like days. She didn't speak much, only nodded when Raylan gave instructions or offered help. But something inside her eyes had changed. She didn't look at him like a threat anymore. She looked at him like she wanted to believe he was real. Outside, the wind howled again, rattling the metal hull of the cargo pod. Raylan stood slowly and walked to the entrance. He opened a small slot in the wall and scanned the junkyard with his binoculars. The patrol drone was gone for now. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He closed the slot and turned back. The mother was staring at him again, her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter. Raylan gave her a soft smile and crouched down near the fire. "You've got a name?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Then, in a soft whisper, she said, "Thela." Raylan nodded. "Pretty name." He looked at the girl. "And you?" The girl peeked out from under her blanket. Her voice was like a breeze. "Luma." "Well, Luma," Raylan said, "you're safe here. Both of you are." Thela's lips trembled. She lowered her head and whispered something in her own language. It wasn't a prayer. It was something else. A promise? A warning? Raylan didn't ask. Instead, he moved to the back wall of the shelter. He had a few crates stacked with old tech, junk to most people, but not to him. With his tools and enough time, Raylan could build almost anything. And now he needed to build something more than machines. He needed to build trust, and maybe even a home. As he began pulling out scrap to make a better heater, Luma crawled closer. She watched him work with wide eyes. Every time a spark flew or a light blinked, her face lit up. Raylan smiled. "You like machines?" he asked. She nodded. Thela sat up straighter. "Her father was an engineer," she said, voice thin. He didn't make it out." Raylan didn't push. He just nodded again and kept working. But in the back of his mind, one question burned. Who were they running from? Later that night, when the others were asleep, Raylan couldn't rest. He lay on his mat, staring at the metal ceiling. The fire had died down, but the warmth still lingered. It was the first time his shelter had felt full, alive. And that scared him, because nothing good lasted long in the outer zones. The next morning, he woke early. The junkyard was still. He stepped outside and climbed up a metal slope to scan the area again. That's when he saw it. Footprints, fresh ones, too big to be Thela or Luma, too new to be his. Raylan knelt beside the marks. He touched the edges. Deep, heavy boots. Maybe 2 sets. He stood slowly, his hand tightening around the small blaster at his hip. Someone had been here, watching, and they didn't belong. He hurried back to the shelter. Taylor was awake now, sitting up with a sharp look in her eyes. "You feel it too," she said quietly. Raylan nodded. "They found us," she whispered. Raylan glanced at Luma. She was still asleep, peaceful for now. "We're not going to let them take her." "Raylan," said Thela, looked at him with something close to disbelief. "You don't know who they are." "I don't care," Raylan answered. "No one else stood up for you, I will." Thela stared for a long time. Then slowly, she reached toward the back of her neck and pulled her shirt aside. Raylan's eyes widened. There was a mark burned into her skin, faint but still visible. A number, a barcode, property tag, slaver made. "They used us to dig ore on a private asteroid field," Thela said. "When we slowed down, they threw us out like trash." Raylan's jaw tightened. "Whoever owns that mine," she added, "owns our lives. They'll keep looking. We are valuable to them." "No," Raylan said firmly. "You're people, not property." He stood, grabbing his tools. His eyes burned with something new. Not just kindness, fury. He pointed to the junk outside. "Then it's time I build something better. Not just a shelter, a place they can't touch, a wall no slaver can break." Thela said nothing, but her eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, quietly. Raylan looked down at Luma, still sleeping, still dreaming. He made a promise right there. No matter what came, he would protect her smile. The broken past Raylan worked through the night. Metal scraped, sparks danced. His hands moved fast, cutting and welding, bolting old panels and refitting insulation. He hadn't slept, not really, but he didn't care. Sleep could wait. Safety couldn't. Outside the shelter, wind blew dust across the wrecks. Somewhere out there, slavers or bounty hunters had caught the scent of the 2 lives Raylan had vowed to protect. Inside, the child slept peacefully, her breathing soft, her fingers curled around a small stuffed toy Raylan had pulled from the back of a cargo pod. It was broken, yes, but to Luma it was everything. Thela hadn't slept. She sat quietly in the corner, her eyes locked on the door as if expecting it to open any second. She hadn't spoken since showing Raylan the scar on her neck, the barcode that branded her as owned. Raylan didn't ask questions, not yet. He knew when someone needed space. But deep down he could feel the storm building, and he needed to understand what they were running from before that storm crashed into all of them. When morning came, he handed Thela a warm cup of broth. Her hands were steadier now. Her strength was coming back, but her eyes still held shadows. "You said you worked the mines," Raylan said carefully. "Private asteroid belts?" Thela stared into the cup. "We weren't workers, we were tools, machines to them, left to die if we slowed down. No food if we spoke out, no light, no fresh air, just cold metal and commands." She closed her eyes for a moment. Raylan waited. Then she began. "There were hundreds of us," she said quietly. "Different species. All stolen, bought, traded. They made us wear collars that shocked us if we spoke anything but the commands. They used children too for small tunnel cracks." Raylan felt his jaw clench. Thela continued. "I was born free. My partner, Jirel, was taken from a colony ship. He had strong hands. Smart mind. They kept him alive longer than most. Made him fix the machines, but when he tried to escape with me and Luma," she looked up, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "They killed him in front of us." Raylan looked down, heart heavy. "We escaped during a riot," she whispered. "Some machines broke down. Fires started. I grabbed Luma and ran. We hid in the waste shuttle. The guards didn't check it. They thought it was trash. And it brought you here," Raylan said. She nodded. "Crushed metal, no food, but better than cages, better than collars." Raylan didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stood and walked to the wall where he had hung his tools. One by one he grabbed supplies. Thela watched him. "What are you doing?" she asked. Raylan glanced back. "I'm turning this place into something stronger. Thicker walls, a hidden exit, a warning system. If they come, I want them to regret it." You would risk your life, Taylor said, for someone you just met? Raylan paused. Then he looked her straight in the eye. You didn't choose to be hunted, but I choose to stand between you and the people hunting you. Her lip trembled, but she said nothing. Later that day, Raylan taught Luma how to connect solar plates. She was quiet at first, unsure of his tools and hands. But soon she began smiling, laughing softly, asking questions. Raylan showed her how to bind wires, reroute power, and make small heat nodes. She learned quickly, too quickly for someone her age. She has her father's mind, Taylor said from behind him. Jarrell could fix anything. He once built a shelter from scraps in the mines. They tore it down, said he was getting too comfortable. Raylan didn't respond. He was watching Luma now, watching the way her hands moved, the joy in her eyes. And he knew, deep down, that she deserved more than this rusted prison of survival. That night, while Luma slept, Raylan installed a motion sensor outside the shelter. He buried it under old scrap, wiring it back to a blinking red light near his bunk. But just as he was finishing the connection, he heard something, a whisper, a metallic shift. He froze. Raylan dropped into a crouch, blaster in hand, and crawled out through the side vent. The night was still, too still. Then he saw it, a figure in the distance, watching the shelter. It moved like a shadow, but Raylan caught the shimmer of a scanner lens, not a drone, a man. Raylan didn't wait. He aimed, but the figure vanished behind the wrecks. He didn't chase. Not yet. Not with Luma and Thela inside. He slipped back into the shelter and locked the hatch. Thela was awake. You saw him too, she said. Raylan nodded. They've found you. No, she said slowly. They're not here for me. Raylan turned sharply. What? She looked down at her hands. They're here for Luma. Raylan frowned. Why? Thela took a deep breath. Her voice was quiet but steady. Luma was born under strange stars during a storm cycle. Jirel said she was special. He didn't know how. But she could sense power, fix machines by touch. Sometimes, they turned on just by her being near. Raylan remembered the broken sensor she had touched, how it flickered back to life. He had thought it was chance. It wasn't. She's not just a child, Taylor whispered. She's a key, and someone wants to turn her into a weapon. Raylan stood in silence. Now everything made sense, why they were hunted, why the tracker was hidden in her toy, why the slavers hadn't sent machines. But men. Luma wasn't a runaway. She was a target. Raylan walked over to the sleeping girl. She breathed softly, still lost in dreams. So small, so fragile, and yet carrying something no child should carry. He made his decision then. No matter who came, no matter what it cost, he would not let anyone touch her again. Whispers in the metal. The junkyard didn't sleep. Even when the stars disappeared behind ash-colored clouds, the metal groaned and shifted, whispering secrets only the wind could understand. Raylan stood alone on the roof of his shelter, his blaster in one hand, a scanner in the other. Below, inside the walls he had welded with care, Thela and Luma slept, though not peacefully. Something had changed. It was no longer a matter of if someone was coming. Now it was when, and Raylan wasn't going to be caught off guard. Earlier that day, he had retraced the footprints left by the shadowy figure he saw the night before. They led to a crumpled wreck on the edge of the junkyard, a forgotten freighter split in half by an ancient crash. Inside, he found signs, boot scuffs in the dust, wrappers from military ration packs, and a broken comm device still warm from recent use. Whoever had been watching them, they weren't just scavengers. They were trained, and they were still nearby. Raylan returned to the shelter with more urgency in his step. His thoughts raced, He had to prepare faster, smarter. He installed another motion sensor, deeper into the scrap maze. This one connected directly to a pulse alarm that only he could hear. Built from an old mining vibration chip, every trap he laid, every wall he reinforced, every backup tunnel he carved from the wrecks. It was all for one reason: to keep Luma breathing. Because now he knew the truth. She wasn't just a child. She was wanted. But he didn't know why. Not yet. That night, Raylan sat with Thala near the fire. Luma was asleep again, curled up with her repaired toy clutched to her chest. The soft red glow from the fire danced on Thyla's face. She looked older now, like she had carried too much pain in too little time. Raylan stared into the flames. "Tell me more about her." Thala didn't respond right away. She sipped water slowly. Her voice came low, careful. "Back on the asteroid," she began. Jirel built a lab in secret, small, hidden in the fuel chambers. He studied Luma's touch, her presence. Machines responded to her like she was part of them. He said her biosignature interfered with decay. That she could wake dead circuits. Raylan frowned. "That's not natural." "No," Thala whispered. "It's not." Jirel said it was seeded, a genetic anomaly. But it wasn't from either of us. Raylan's grip on his tool tightened. "So someone made her that way?" Thala nodded slowly. He believed she was born with a buried code, something ancient, something from a race older than us all, a signal embedded in her blood. She doesn't even know it, but they do. Raylan stood, pacing now. His mind was racing. "That's why they branded you, why they wanted her alive." "They see her as a tool," Thala said. "A device to unlock something. Maybe weapons, maybe ancient tech." Jirel feared they wanted to use her to control machines, or worse. Raylan stared at her. "Why worse?" Thala looked toward Luma, her voice shaking. "Because if a child can wake machines from death, and what happens when she grows up?" That thought sat like a stone in Raylan's stomach. Outside, the wind howled again, but this time it wasn't just wind. Raylan's ears twitched, a click. Then, a soft hum like static crawling through air. He turned, sprinting to the far wall where his newest sensor blinked red. Someone had triggered it. He opened the hidden hatch and slipped out into the wreck maze. Moving silently, he crouched low, blaster drawn. His boots avoided the loud panels he had memorized from years of scavenging, and then he heard it. Voices. 2 of them. Male, whispering in a harsh dialect. Not traders, not scavengers. He crept closer and hid behind a dented escape pod. One of the men wore scavenger armor, but it was too clean, too polished. The other wore black with metal implants along his jawline. His eyes glowed faintly. An Augman Slivertech. "They're inside that shelter," the first man said. "Confirmed by the tracker pulse." "Then why haven't we gone in?" The Augman hissed. "We wait. The girl must not be harmed. Her blood needs to be clean for the transfer." Raylan felt ice run down his back. They didn't just want to take her. They wanted to use her. "I'll alert the others," the first man continued. "We surround the structure at dawn." The Augman nodded. "If the human resists, terminate him quietly." Raylan backed away. Every muscle in his body told him to shoot now, but he didn't. Not yet. He had a better idea. He moved fast. Silent. Back through the wreck maze. Back to the shelter. Inside, Thala looked up, sensing something was wrong. "They'll attack. At dawn," Raylan said quickly. "They want Luma alive, but they want me dead." Thala stood. "We'll run." "No," Raylan said. "Running won't help. We need to hide and trick them." He pulled aside the floor mat and opened a hatch. A narrow tunnel just big enough for Thala and Luma led deep into the wrecks. "I dug it 2 years ago. Thought I'd use it if the core ever turned on me. It's safe. Leads to a derelict power station 2 clicks out." Thala nodded. "And you?" Raylan grabbed his tools and walked toward the main door. "I'm staying." I'm going to make them think you're still here, and when they come for you—" He turned back, eyes burning. "They'll meet me instead." Thela stepped forward. "You'll die." Raylan gave her a tired smile. "Not if I turn the whole junkyard into a trap." The hunters arrive. It wasn't sunrise. It was scanner fog. Chemical haze dropped from above to blind local sensors. Raylan had seen it before on war broadcasts. Cheap, fast, and deadly if inhaled for too long. The slavers were covering their tracks. He stood alone in front of his shelter, eyes narrowed, breath steady. In his hands were no fancy weapons, no heavy armor. Just a modified plasma wrench, a pulse trigger detonator, and every ounce of fury he'd built over the last 48 hours. Beneath his boots, the ground hummed, not with life, but with traps. Raylan had turned the surrounding wrecks into a minefield. Old pressure plates were rewired to send shockwaves through loose metal. Ramps, hidden under trash, would collapse under the weight of anyone heavy, and one section, just outside the entrance, was layered with an explosive gas cell wired to trigger at his signal. They wouldn't see it coming. Inside the hidden tunnel, Thyla and Luma crawled silently toward the power station Raylan had shown them. The narrow space scraped Tayla's shoulders, and Luma coughed from the dust, but they moved fast. They didn't argue. They didn't look back, because they both knew Raylan was buying them time with his life. Back at the shelter, the fog thickened. Then, from the metal mist, shadows appeared. 4, no, 5. Raylan stood still. The first slaver to step forward was the Augman. His glowing eyes scanned the area like radar. "The human's still here," he said to the others. "Heat signature confirmed, but the child's trace is gone." One of the others muttered, "He moved them, maybe to another sector." The Augman stepped closer, his metal hand gripping a sharp spike-like weapon. "Search him, then burn the place." Raylan smiled, just a little. The slavers began to move forward. The first one stepped on a flat plate disguised with broken food, wrappers. There was a click. Too late. Boom! A sonic wave blasted upward, flinging metal and dust into the air. The slaver screamed as shrapnel tore into his legs. 2 more were thrown off balance. Raylan ducked behind a panel and slammed his detonator. Boom, boom. The gas cell exploded behind them, swallowing the back line in fire. Now only 2 were left. The Augman and a scout in red armor. Raylan ran. Not away from them. He moved deeper into the junk maze, boots hitting pre-measured markers, every step part of a plan. The remaining slavers chased him, stepping over the wrecks, unaware that Raylan was herding them. Like cattle to the slaughter, the Augman shouted. "Flank him!" Raylan slipped through a side shaft and activated another trap, a full scrap wall, dropped behind him, separating the 2 slavers. The Red Scout was on his own now, panting, looking around with rising fear. Raylan waited in the dark, watching the man stumble into a clearing where the floor looked like simple metal sheets. It wasn't. Raylan's voice came from behind him. "You ever wonder why no one loots this sector?" The scout spun around. "Where are you?" Raylan triggered a magnet switch. The floor under the scout glowed blue, then vanished. Clank. The man fell straight into a reactor shaft. Raylan closed it. 1 left. The Augman. Stronger, smarter, more careful. Raylan climbed the outside of a cargo lifter and positioned himself above the main passageway. Below, the Augman crept forward, scanning, breathing heavy. "You're not just a scavenger," the Augman growled. "You were trained." Raylan said nothing. The Augman kept moving, slowly. "Military? Black Ops? Doesn't matter. You're alone." Raylan activated a flash mine. Crack. Blinding white light exploded inches from the Augman's face. The slaver screamed, falling back, grabbing at his eyes. Raylan dropped from above, tackling him. They crashed into the dirt, struggling. The Augman swung wildly with his metal arm, slashing Raylan's shoulder. Raylan gritted his teeth and slammed the plasma wrench into the Augman's neck. Zap, electricity surged. The Augman spasmed, but didn't fall. "You're weak," the slaver hissed. You're in my house. Raylan spat back. They rolled, fighting tooth and nail. Blood sprayed. Metal clashed. Raylan took a hard punch to the ribs, then saw his chance. He jammed the wrench into the Augman's chest port and yanked. Sparks flew. The Augman screamed. His systems crashed one by one. Finally, he collapsed, twitching. Raylan stood over him, chest heaving. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. His right arm burned from the hit. But he was alive. And the slavers? Gone. He limped. Back to the shelter. The place was in ruins, scorched metal, craters from explosions. Smoke still drifted from holes in the wall. Raylan fell to one knee. The silence was deafening. But then, a beep. His communicator blinked. He picked it up with a shaking hand. Thala's voice came through. Raylan? Raylan, are you? I'm here, he said softly. A pause. Then she whispered. We saw the fire. Are they? Raylan looked around at the damage, the wrecked ground, the dead silence. They're not coming back. There was no cheering, no shouting, just a breath, a release of fear. We're coming to you, Thala said. No, Raylan replied. Stay at the station. It's safer for now. I'll fix this. I'll rebuild. There was a long pause, then a soft voice on the line. Raylan. Luma. You, okay, kiddo? Are you hurt? She asked. Raylan smiled despite the pain. Not enough to stop me. Another pause. Then Luma said, You're not just a builder. You're a wall. Raylan blinked. A wall? Yeah, she said. You stand between the bad and the good, like my dad used to say. Some people build, some people break, but the strong ones, they stand. Raylan leaned his head back against a metal beam and let that sink in. The fire, the blood, the broken ribs, it was all worth it, because he wasn't just protecting a girl anymore. He was protecting hope. The story of fire and grit. The fires burned for 2 days, not wildfires, controlled ones. Raylan had lit them himself. One by one, he dropped the wrecked slaver gear into the flames. Armor, implants, scanners, boots, anything that held memory chips or signal traces. They couldn't risk being tracked again. He stood over the fire, in silence, watching the last black helmet melt into slag. The metal hissed. The flames rose. His shoulder still throbbed from the fight. His ribs ached every time he breathed. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop, because he'd made a promise. The junkyard shelter was nothing but ruins now. One side was completely gone. Walls torn apart. Floor panels scorched. Everything he'd built, the warmth, the safety, had turned to ash. But fire didn't just destroy. Sometimes, it forged something stronger. Raylan knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Thala and Luma returned on the third day. They stood at the edge of the cratered clearing, looking at the wreckage with wide eyes. Luma clung to her mother's arm. She didn't cry, but her small face was pale. Raylan turned to them, wiping grease from his hands. I'm glad you're back, he said. Luma ran to him and hugged his waist. He froze for a second, then dropped to one knee and hugged her tight. You're safe now, he whispered. Thala looked at the shelter remains. Are we? Raylan nodded toward the side of the hill where new metal sheets were stacked, carefully arranged like puzzle pieces. We will be, he said. This time, we build it to last. And so they began. Raylan didn't just rebuild, he reimagined. He designed a layered structure, part bunker, part home. Its foundation was buried in the earth. Reinforced doors, underground vents, solar shielding. Every trap from before? Upgraded. He taught Thala how to weld. Her hands were unsure at first, but her eyes were steady. She learned fast, focused, strong. She wasn't just a refugee anymore. She was a builder. Luma helped too, using her strange touch to check circuits, boost signals, and even repower broken tech. Sometimes Raylan caught her standing beside a broken light panel just staring, and then it would flicker to life. She didn't understand how, but Raylan did. She was growing. One night, As the new structure took shape, Raylan sat with Thela by the fireplate eating from ration packs. "You don't have to stay," she said quietly. "You've done more than anyone." Raylan looked at her, tired eyes glowing in the firelight. "I want to stay," he said. "But why?" she asked. "You're human. You don't owe us anything." Raylan took a slow breath. "When I was a kid," he said, "pirates raided our farm station. My parents didn't make it. I hid in the ventilation shaft for 2 days." Thela listened, quiet. "I waited for help," Raylan continued, "but no one came. The Corp said the zone was unregistered. Not their problem." He stared into the fire. "I swore that if I ever had the power to protect someone, I wouldn't wait, I'd stand up." Thela's hand touched his, warm and gentle. "You've done more than protect," she said. "You gave us our future back." That future was threatened again sooner than expected. On the 5th night, a transmission hit Raylan's hacked comm. A signal pulse buried in an old frequency. "Weak, encrypted, but clear. Unit 3 destroyed. Target not recovered. Authorize Phase 2. Raylan's blood turned cold. Phase 2? He boosted the signal, rerouted it through Luma's modified processor, and cracked the code. Then he saw it, a map, coordinates, multiple units. Bigger ships, ground units, retrieval protocols. They weren't sending hunters anymore. They were sending an army. Raylan didn't tell Thela that night. Instead, he sat in the shadows, holding the blueprint Luma had drawn with her chalk. It showed their shelter, every wall, every wire, every beam. And beyond that, ideas. A garden dome, water recyclers, a learning room. She wasn't just dreaming. She was planning a life. Raylan stood and walked outside, looking up at the dark sky. A few stars peeked through the smoke clouds. "They're coming," he whispered. "And this time, they're not going to make the mistake of underestimating a scavenger." The next day, he began building something new. Not just for shelter. For war. He scouted deep into the junkyard, pulling out core fragments, broken drones, and heavy armor plates. He created false heat signatures, dummy shelters, trap tunnels. He rigged sensor alarms using scrap from mining bots. He set EMP traps that would fry implants. He even made signal scramblers to confuse incoming ships. When Thela saw what he was doing, she didn't ask why. She just helped. Even Luma, they weren't hiding anymore. They were preparing. That night, as Raylan adjusted the outer solar turret and checked the motion grid, he saw something in the distance. A light in the sky. Moving. Fast, not a star, not a drone, a ship. He opened his communicator. "Thela, get Luma underground, now." Inside the shelter, alarms blinked red. Raylan grabbed his gear. Blaster, wrench, shock knives. His eyes were calm now. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. The wind picked up. Dust swirled. The junkyard became a ghost field of shadows and steel. Then, the ship descended. A large one. Black hull. Slaver symbols glowing faint blue. Raylan stood at the edge of the hill. Alone. No fear, no backup. Just fire in his blood and grit in his bones. The ship hovered for a moment, then dropped a ramp. A line of armored troops stepped out. At the front, a tall figure with a silver staff scanned the area. Raylan didn't move. The slaver. Captain raised a comm device. "Return the child, human. You've been warned." Raylan smiled. "I'm not done warning you." And behind him, the junkyard came alive. Lights blinked. Traps armed. Circuits buzzed. Raylan pressed the switch on his wrist. Everything exploded into light. A home made by hands, the junkyard was no longer silent. It roared with fire, steel, and fury. Raylan stood in the eye of the storm. Explosions lit the sky behind him, turning night into a battlefield of broken metal and orange flame. His traps had worked. The first wave of slavers never saw it coming. EMP mines dropped their comms, shock panels fried their weapons, and the pressure plates flung soldiers through the air like ragdolls. But there were too many. Raylan ducked behind a slagged fuel tank as plasma bolts tore into the ground. Sparks flew over his head. He counted 6 soldiers closing in, moving fast through the maze of twisted wreckage. He tapped the pulse detonator on his wrist. Boom! A nearby tower of junk collapsed, crushing 3 of them beneath collapsing engines. The rest scattered. Raylan rolled out from cover, plasma wrench in one hand, shock knife in the other. He moved fast, years of scavenger reflexes guiding him. One soldier lunged toward him. Raylan ducked low, stabbed into the man's side, and triggered the shock burst. The soldier convulsed and dropped, but the other 2 regrouped. Raylan backed into an alley of bent wing panels, breathing hard. He wasn't going to last much longer. Not alone. Suddenly the comlink buzzed. "Raylan, it's me." Thela's voice. "I'm in position. The rear trap tunnel is open. Get them close." Raylan grinned. Blood trickled from a cut above his brow. "Copy that," he said. "Let's take out the trash." Thela crouched near the rear of the shelter, hidden beneath a collapsed transport hull. Her hands gripped the controls Raylan had taught her to use. She wasn't a fighter, but today she was a shield. Beside her, Luma crouched in the shadows, her fingers trembling, eyes wide. But she wasn't crying. She was watching, learning, and for the first time, understanding why her father had called humans dangerous, not for their weapons but for their will. Raylan drew the 2 slavers deeper into the junk tunnel. They chased him with heavy boots and loud shouts. One shouted into his damaged comms, "Target approaching Sector D4. Too late. As soon as both soldiers passed the marked line, Thela hit the trigger. Thwump. The ground exploded beneath them. A hidden pit, lined with old thruster coils, dragged them into a magnetic trap zone. One tried to grab the edge. Raylan kicked him down. He didn't even look back. More ships were landing now. 3, maybe 4. Raylan climbed to a higher ledge and looked out over the battlefield. It was madness. The junkyard was alive. Fires burning, machines buzzing, traps still detonating. But it wouldn't hold forever. He pressed the final override on his wrist. It activated the failsafe, the junkyard's heart, buried deep in the oldest shipwreckage. A core from an ancient fusion drive began to hum. Raylan had found it years ago, too broken to fly, too dangerous to sell, but perfect for one thing, a final defense. The slaver command ship touched down at the edge of the field. A massive ramp lowered. Dozens of armed soldiers marched out, flanking. A tall figure in silver and black robes. His face was covered. His voice echoed through a speaker. "Return the child or we take her by force." Raylan stood at the top of a wrecked transport and shouted back, "You already tried force." He held up the detonator. "And this is my junkyard." The fusion core began to rise, lifted by an old mech arm Raylan had repaired for this moment. It glowed blue with unstable energy. The soldiers hesitated. The slaver leader froze. "That's a fusion core," he hissed. "You'll kill everyone." Raylan's voice didn't shake. "Only if you keep pushing." A long silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. Luma stepped forward, past the broken wall, past her mother's grip. She walked toward Raylan with slow, careful steps. Her small hands were glowing. Faint blue light pulsed from her fingers. Raylan turned, shocked. "Luma, no, get back." But she shook her head. "I can feel it." She walked up to the fusion core, glowing brighter now. "I can stop it," she said softly. "Or guide it." Raylan stepped closer, lowering his weapon. "You can control the core?" Luma nodded. "If I focus, I think I can bend the signal, redirect it, turn it into a wall." "A wall?" Raylan echoed. "Yes," she said. "A barrier around us. No one gets through." Thela rushed over, terrified. "Luma, it could kill you." But the child looked at her. "No, Mom. This is what I was made for. Not for them. Not for war." She looked at Raylan. "For home." Raylan knelt, holding her shoulders. "You sure?" Luma nodded once. Raylan looked at Thela. "We trust her." Thela's eyes filled with tears, and then Luma stepped into the circle of the core. She raised her arms, and the junkyard began to glow. Waves of blue light surged from the center, rising like a dome. The fusion energy spiraled, not out of control but under her hands. The slavers shouted, fired, but their weapons hit the light and stopped. The dome spread, faster, higher, until the entire junkyard was under it. Inside, silence. Outside, chaos. The slavers couldn't penetrate the field. Their bullets, their blasts, their tech. It all failed. The leader screamed into his comms. Fall back, it's a trap. She's activated some kind of ancient tech. Ships tried to lift off, but their engines jammed. Raylan's jammers locked them down. One by one, the slavers fled on foot, and those who didn't were swallowed by the junk. Raylan turned back to Luma. Her body was glowing like starlight now. The fusion pulse burned in her hands, then slowly faded, until it was just light. Then silence. She fell forward. Raylan caught her. Thela rushed to them, but Luma was alive. Exhausted, yes, but smiling. I did it, she whispered. We're safe now. In the days that followed, word spread through the stars. A slaver force had been broken by one man, one alien woman, and a child of mystery. They called it madness. They called it luck. But those who saw it knew the truth. It was will. Raylan rebuilt the shelter again, this time stronger, taller, with walls wrapped in the junkyard's history and blood, a dome of peace. He made rooms for Luma to learn. He made tools for Thela to create. And outside he planted the first green vine to grow in dead metal soil, a symbol that life could bloom anywhere, even in rust. One day Luma asked him, "Why? Do you keep building?" Raylan smiled and ran his hand over the wall he'd made with his bare hands. Because every home starts with one person who refuses to give up.